Welcome to our community conversation on COVID-19. I'm Dr. Bryan Williams, president of McCall College and moderator of this series. McCall College is our local institution that offers post-secondary education of all ages. The motto of our series is Local Voices Addressing Local Issues. Our goal is to encourage vaccine participation by those who are hesitant. We've got 10,000 residents here in Valley County in the west central mountains of Idaho. Of those 10,000, 3,000 will probably be hesitant to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Each one hesitates for a variety of reasons. Our series will attempt to answer the main points of concern with trusted, local sources of information. The freedom we'll receive from herd immunity will only be achieved with the participation of our hesitant population. We are really excited tonight to be able to introduce you to pharmacist Kevin Ellis. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you, Bryan.
Thank you for participating in our series. You are truly a trusted local source of information, and I'm so pleased you agreed to help us with our series.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Can you give us a bit of your background?
Briefly, I was born and raised in Idaho, grew up in Burley, graduated high school, went to college in Pocatello, Idaho State University, graduated college in 1997, moved to McCall in 1998, and I've been here ever since.
And I've heard you're going fishing this weekend.
Going fishing.
So if anybody wants a good story when they come into the pharmacy, launch a fishing story. Would that would appeal to you?
Well, hopefully there's a good fishing story at the end of this.
Oh, okay, good enough. What motivated you to become a pharmacist?
So growing up as a child, I had asthma, allergies, lots of health issues. And as I got older and the healthcare involved in trying to stay healthy and stay out of the hospital, I took a personal interest in trying to help take care of myself, and in the process was able to help others. And it's just grown from there.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? Vaccines have become a feature of our pharmacy activity. How has it changed your profession?
So when I graduated, pharmacists were not vaccinating. That came around a little bit later and started with flu vaccines. I remember the first year we were offering flu vaccines, I think I had one vial of 10 doses, and I don't think I gave all of those doses. It was, and we were hesitant to give vaccines. It was new. It was something else we were going to have to do on top of what we were already doing. The following year, I think we did over 200 vaccinations. The year after that, I think we were up around 1,000. So once it got started enrolling, and people appreciate the convenience, the extra hours, they don't have to come, between the hours of 8 and 5, they don't have to schedule an appointment. So a lot of people like the ability to come in at their leisure whenever it works for them. So it's become more and more popular over the years. And especially here recently with the COVID vaccine, trying to get as many vaccination sites and ability to vaccinate as many people as possible, wherever they can get it, that's what we're going for here. So
I would be really squeamish if I all of a sudden had to begin giving more vaccines to someone. How did you get over that sort of feeling of a participatory medical intervention like a vaccine? How did you get there? That seems to me different than the training you would have received as a pharmacist.
Correct. And different in some aspects, but it falls right in line with what we do. There's an actual giving of the vaccine, the needle, and the infection precaution and other actual vaccination issues, but the education is pretty similar. Learning about the vaccines and then educating people about vaccines. they go hand in hand. I mean, we were telling people about them and trying to follow up and make sure that people were getting the vaccinations as needed. This just fits in line with that, in that you need this vaccine, we can give it to you while you're here.
Have you noticed, I don't know if you've seen any national numbers, but to me it would be better, it must be better to have vaccines given in a pharmacy. The ability to deliver far more vaccines must be now higher than if we just had our physicians like early in our lives. Is there data like that that says we're doing a better job of vaccinating the general population?
Yes and no. There are more vaccinations given at pharmacies. I think the numbers are growing every year. I don't have specific numbers or data. I think the last numbers I saw were from 2017 or 18, where they figured, I think it was around roughly 35% of all vaccinations were given in the pharmacy.
Yeah.
And I think with flu shots in particular, that number is considerably higher.
I would think.
Because the flu shots have certainly become the staple for pharmacies. All the other vaccinations are offered at pharmacies, but they're not as common as the flu shot. But the numbers it's growing and becoming more of a staple. Insurance plans, I believe it's cheaper for pharmacists to administer vaccines, so a lot of third parties are directing people to pharmacies. Medicare in particular only pays for certain vaccinations through the pharmacy.
So it's really been a benefit to the general population to have our pharmacists active in the vaccination program.
Yeah. Like I say, the big thing is the extended hours, as opposed to an office where they're open limited hours. Most pharmacies are open extended hours, certainly late into the evening after people get off work and weekends.
If I can take you now to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm sure over the last year, are we a year and a half into this? You've had people that are symptomatic as they come to you and come to the desk. What advice or what regimens have you been offering to those that are symptomatic for COVID-19?
So really, for the most part, and thankfully, we don't get a lot of symptomatic patients in the pharmacy. So we have a lot of phone calls. I know the clinics and the doctor's offices have a lot of symptomatic patients. A lot of people are either having friends or family run into the pharmacy to get stuff for them. They're trying to minimize exposure, which is a good thing.
Sure.
And have people run errands for them, or they will call if they're downstairs. We can, they can pay for stuff and we can run it down to them.
Okay.
Without having to actually have them come into the store. There have been occasions where people have come in, but by and far, most people have been pretty respectful and tried to avoid coming into the store.
And so what meds are they typically needing if they're symptomatic? Is it analgesics or what are they needing if they become symptomatic?
And it would be symptomatic. So it would depend on the symptoms and the severity. Most people, it's antihistamine for runny nose, cough suppressant for the cough, fluid, rest, hydration are the kind of prime. It's a viral infection. It will run its course. If it doesn't get severe and there's no other intervention needed, it's pretty much just rest and get through it, let the body run its course.
Very, very good. Information has really been a challenge in the pandemic. Now with the internet, we're all exposed to vast quantities of information. And so the greatest problem I think all of us have is how do we sort through information? Are there sources of information that you guide people to so that they can have a successful outcome, not only from the medication, but also the information that tells them what's going on?
Yeah, so this is probably the toughest area just because of the vast amount of information that's out there, good and bad. Facebook, a lot of people get their information from Facebook, which is a terrible source for information.
Okay.
simply because everybody can put their opinion out there. I try to tell people go to respected sites. You know, the CDC is a good site, WebMD, there's John Hopkins, there's information out there that are verified and written by trusted professionals that give you the facts. So try to steer people to those sites and avoid the he said, she said.
Now, an awful lot of folks don't have computers. Are public libraries a successful source? Have you had any experience there, or what's your thoughts on for those that just don't have those technological resources?
Right. So the library has been great. I know they offer computer time, and they have people that will help people on the computer. Phone calls have been our biggest probably source of information. People calling, asking questions, and that's always welcome. I mean, if you can't get online or get the information from somewhere else, just call somebody that you trust, your doctor, your pharmacist, your nurse, and they'll help you with some information.
Excellent. How are you handling the diverse information that really is misinformation that you're hearing related to COVID-19 that's flowing in our community? Is there a technique that you've tried to use to sort of tamp down the misinformation that's out there?
Not really. I mean, it's out there, and unless somebody asks me a question or asks us a question about a specific thing that they've heard or need more information on, I don't know what they're reading or what their thoughts are on the process. So I enjoy the questions. I enjoy the people asking the questions, because that's the only way I hear about what's out there sometimes, because a lot of it I'll disregard. I don't actually read some of the information that's out there because it's not worth my time.
A lot of the information has revolved around two medication, hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. And so I'm wondering, if I were a person that has now approached the counter and say, I'd like to get some of either one of these two drugs, what would happen?
So two things. The ivermectin, well, both are prescription only. So you have to have a prescription from your doctor.
Okay.
There is no evidence to say either one of these are effective. There's a lot of case reports. There's a lot of people that have heard it works. There's people that want to try it. There's doctors that have used it and say that it works and is successful, which is where some of these reports come from.
Okay.
When the studies were done looking at the effectiveness, it was not any better than not using it. So it's hard to say either one of these will be of significant benefit. And ivermectin in particular, where it has animal veterinary use and people use, there may be some people trying to get it from a veterinary source, which causes problems on the dosing side. So we try and recommend against that. But that's also a discussion to have with your doctor as well, if they feel it's appropriate.
Okay. Would you help us with the available vaccines? There seems to be some confusion. There's lots of vaccines in the news. There's vaccines that are coming that we're hearing about. A lot of confusion over vaccines. Could you define the available vaccines that are relevant to our region for someone in the West Central Mountains of Idaho?
Certainly. So currently there are 3 vaccines approved for use in the United States. That's the Moderna, the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Johnson & Johnson. And the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine are both 2 doses. Moderna is initially 1 shot, 28 days later, you get your 2nd dose. Pfizer is initially your 1st shot, 21 days later, 2nd dose. Johnson & Johnson is a single dose. And that's the one that a lot of people are waiting for because it's a single dose.
Yeah.
And that is appealing, except it's not available in large quantities yet. So the shipments are pretty sporadic and not readily available yet. Moderna is stored at regular freezer temperatures, and it's easier for us to store the Moderna vaccine. So here in the mountains, in our small community, I think predominantly, if not exclusively, Moderna vaccine is available. Johnson & Johnson also stored in a refrigerator. When it's available, it's something that will become more and more available, I hope. Pfizer is available down in the valley. So down in Boise, they're using the Pfizer vaccine. If somebody has a preference for one over the other for any reason.
Now, the Moderna vaccine, I understand, needs extraordinarily cold storage.
Pfizer.
Do both of them? Oh, well, both of them seem to have some real cold storage needs.
Yes.
So could you define how in the world do you succeed at the cold storage for both of those vaccines?
So Moderna is regular freezer.
Is it really? Okay.
Yeah. So it's frozen, -13 to +5. Has to stay within that regular freezer temp range. Pfizer is the super cold vaccine. So that one is stored anywhere from -80 to -114. And that's why we don't carry that one up here due to the storage conditions. It can be stored at regular freezer temp, same as the Moderna, for 2 weeks. But if you can't use your supply within the 2 weeks, then you have to throw it out.
Okay.
So it creates some logistical issues. It can be stored in the temporary shipping container. You just have to change the dry ice every 5 days. So in lieu of having to use it in 14 days or mess with the dry ice, we've been able to secure the Moderna vaccine and use the regular freezer for storage.
Now, each of the vials has a select number of doses you can pull out of it. Has your pharmacy been, when you don't have enough appointments, have you been trying to find people to fill out a vial, or how in the world have you made sure that you can use this precious commodity that we've got here in McCall?
Absolutely. So we've done it a number of ways. When this whole process started, we've had people express interest at the pharmacy, and we write their name down with their phone number.
Okay.
When vaccines are available, this vaccine in particular is being scheduled just because we have to have enough people to use enough doses and know how many doses we're going to need for a particular time frame. So most of the appointments are scheduled with a particular number in mind. So we try to reach the number of doses we have available. If we're short or have cancellations, we have a list of people that we call. And short of that, there are people walking through the store. We can ask. There are people that come into the store asking if we have extra vaccines. So the information has been relayed to people that keep checking. I mean, keep communicating, and that's what we've been doing. We've been fortunate here that up until recently, we have not actually wasted a single dose yet.
Oh my, that's takes some work to make sure that happens.
It takes a lot of work. But
now, these two vaccines are different in the way that they work. Can you give us sort of a lay understanding of what those differences are between the vaccines? So if we're choosing the Johnson & Johnson or the Pfizer or the Moderna, what are some of those technicalities that might be important to us?
So the big differences are really just technicalities. All three are pretty similar. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are very similar. Those are both mRNA particles that when they get injected into the arm, the immune system takes up the mRNA that triggers the cells to produce the spike proteins that you see on the COVID virus. When the cells produce those spike proteins, the rest of our immune system then recognizes those spike proteins as foreign, and they create antibodies to the spike proteins. After that process is complete, the cells that produce the spike proteins, our own cells, die, and the mRNA is destroyed with the cell when it dies. but the antibodies that the body produces to the spike protein stay in circulation, and the body will then be able to attack the COVID virus when we're exposed to it. Pfizer and Moderna are working the same way. So those two do the same thing. Johnson & Johnson is a viral vector, which simply put is they use a harmless virus to carry the information to the immune cells to then produce the same spike proteins. So instead of just the mRNA being taken up by the cells, the virus gets the information into the cells, and then our cells produce the spike proteins that trigger the immune response.
What side effects have we seen locally? I've had some folks come up to me and just say, boy, when I understand the side effects locally, then I'll think about getting this vaccine. So what our community is experiencing is really important to some of our hesitant people. What side effects have you heard about that are relevant in the vaccine process that you've encountered?
Certainly. So locally, we've seen pretty much a mirror image of what we're seeing on the national level, in that most people feel pretty well. The biggest side effect, Moderna and Pfizer, is injection site pain. So okay. Where we give you the shot, that arm will probably be sore anywhere from 3 to 4 days, typically, and varying degrees of pain, anywhere from minor discomfort to it really kind of hurts. Does seem to be a little bit worse with the second dose, but pretty consistent, right around 90%. So it's pretty common the arm will be sore. That if that's your biggest problem, it's really pretty easy to deal with. The rest of the side effects, the fever, in a small percentage of people will have fever, chills. Less than 10% nausea, vomiting is possible. Again, typically just a day. The day after seems to be kind of the time frame for when people are going to feel the worst. We do have some aches and pains, waking up feeling bad the next day. Again, it seems to be worse with the second dose, and seems to be a little bit more prevalent in younger people. Older people seem to be doing better with both doses. More of the reaction in younger people, which the reactions that we experience are the immune system doing its job. So if you get those, okay, it's working.
So we probably should say, instead of side effects of the vaccines, that this is the earned immune response to the vaccine. Is that too politically correct?
Well, I don't want to imply that if you don't get those
true,
effects, that it is not doing its job either.
Yeah.
Because just because people feel great the next day and have no issues, that it's not working, because it does still do the job. It's just that some people feel fine, and some people will be sore, and some people, quite frankly, can be miserable, anywhere from 24 to 72 hours. Most commonly, and a huge majority of patients, the day after might be rough, but the day after that, they feel fine.
Would you recommend they take the next day off? Is the profile enough that you'd make that recommendation?
I personally would, if you have the ability to take the next day off, just from a comfort standpoint. You will feel better not having to work, as opposed to trying to work through some of these symptoms. Personally, on my own experience, after both doses, I was just tired. I did have a headache, which is relatively common the day after, and fatigue. I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to go do anything. So I didn't feel bad. I could have gone to work. I could have worked, but had no energy to actually want to do that.
And so many of the protocols in our businesses ask us about those specific side effects, so that if we have chills, or we have lassitude or weakness, and we just don't have a lot of energy, those are all typically on that list that we're all invited to answer to before we start
Right.
many of our shifts. And so we might be going home anyway because we'd have to respond. So it seems like it might be wise for that. That was my experience as well.
Yes, if at all possible, that would be the best course of action. If not possible, like I say, the percentage of people that feel that bad is pretty small. Probably, I would guess, less than 20%.
So for those that are hesitant because of vaccines, what do you say to them? Because of possible side effects to a vaccine, what do you say to them on that ground itself?
So on that ground itself, if we're just talking about the vaccine, most of the side effects are remedied with analgesics, Tylenol, ibuprofen.
Okay.
So people do feel better. It's worth a day of discomfort to avoid having to quarantine for 2 weeks. It's worth a day of discomfort to not give a family member or grandparent an infection that might kill them.
Okay.
So from that standpoint, it's better than the actual disease.
Okay.
So typically just a day, and you may not feel great, but the day after that, most people feel back to normal.
So if you're in the middle of this experience and you're really feeling crummy, is there a threshold where you would say take your analgesics, or what advice would you give them if they're really in the middle of that crummy 24, 48 hours?
Yeah, if you're in the middle of it and you feel like you need to take something, Tylenol, ibuprofen, Aleve, whatever your pain reliever of choice is, I encourage people to do that.
Do you?
It doesn't affect anything from the vaccination. We tell people not to pre-medicate. There's some evidence that the pre-medication might interfere with the immune response, but certainly after the vaccine is given, you can take the medications and feel better, and there's no issue.
Let's say that again, because that's distinctive. So beforehand is pre-medicating. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because you assume there's going to be a problem, you don't like those problems,
Right.
Don't go down that path. So come into the vaccine. How long would you recommend them to not pre-medicate? Is that a 8-hour? Is that a 12-hour?
So, in line with that is, if you normally take a medication, if say you have arthritis and you take an anti-inflammatory to help with the arthritis, we urge you to keep taking that. We don't want you to induce any type of remission or cause any problems by not taking the medication. So for people that normally take it anyway, we would say continue to take your medication.
Mm-hmm.
For people that don't take medication normally, we don't want them to take something ahead of time, just in case it might interfere with the immune response.
Okay.
And we don't have data that says it does, but there's some case reports that there might be less of an immune response if you do pre-medicate. So just to play it safe, we're urging people not to pre-medicate. But if after the vaccine you feel like you need something, absolutely.
Excellent. That's really wise. Thank you for making that clear.
Yeah.
Now that we have 3 vaccines that are available, there seems to be some cherry picking happening. I'd like this one. I don't want this one.
Yes.
What advice are you having on, so let's ask the question this way. Are any of the vaccines better than any of the other vaccines?
So depending on your definition of better, yes and no.
Okay.
The end result, if we're trying to keep people out of the hospital and we are trying to keep people from dying, they all work.
Okay.
100%. So if you get a vaccine, you're not going to go to the hospital, you're not going to die. That's the benefit. The Johnson & Johnson is the single dose vaccine that's available. If we just looked at preventing COVID infection, not hospitalization and death, just COVID prevention, it's 67% effective. So roughly a third of people are still going to get COVID after having the vaccine.
Okay.
But it's not going to be severe. They're not going to go to the hospital and not going to die. So mission accomplished.
Excellent.
And people like it. It sounds appealing because it's one dose. So you get one dose, you get the sore arm, you may have fever, chills, nausea, vomiting, you may have all that for a day. but you're done. You don't have to come back for a second dose. So it is appealing, and if it's available, absolutely. I wouldn't suggest one vaccine over another. Currently, with the supply issues, whichever vaccine is available is the one we recommend. If we're talking about COVID infection, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are both about 95% effective in preventing infection. So those two vaccines are better for preventing infection, but the end result is the same: no hospitalization, no death. So they all do the job. So I wouldn't feel bad about one over another. If it's available and you have access to it, they all do the job.
Have you seen any data on symptomatic decrease because you've had the vaccine, so that you couldn't give it to someone else? Is there a symptomatic decrease that we've begun to see with any of these vaccines?
So there seems to be a trend in number of infections declining, which you would expect.
Okay.
There was some concern, and probably still is some concern, about people being asymptomatic and maybe transmitting to somebody else after being vaccinated. And I have not seen any numbers or any information that is happening, but I think somebody's looking at it.
Okay. The stories that flow around the vaccines are equally fascinating, and you sort of can't decide if it's misinformation or information. One of the most challenging stories that I heard is that your mRNA permanently changes your DNA. I've heard that more than once. And so if someone were standing in front of you at the pharmacy as a question, where would you go with something like that? Or are there other challenging issues? Let's start with that one. But are there others that you can think of that really you'd like to address tonight?
So, excuse me. The DNA one is a big one, and I think a lot of people are worried about that. The mRNA does not enter the nucleus of the cell. It does not affect your DNA. It does not affect anything on the level that it changes you. It works in much the same way that viruses do, in that when a virus infects, if you get COVID takes over your cells and produces more COVID viruses. And then those viruses go infect other cells, and it creates more COVID viruses. So your body creates the viruses once you're infected. This does the same thing. The mRNA causes those proteins in the cells to create the spike proteins, just one little part of the vaccine, not the entire vaccine. So you're not going to get sick. It's just a piece of the virus, as opposed to the COVID infection, which actually takes over the same material and produces the whole virus, which then creates more viruses. So it does not affect your DNA. It's not going to change you forever. You're not going to grow a third arm.
And I think part of the reassurance is its incredibly cold temperatures, so that the minute you bring it out of its cold temperature, such as your body, then I would imagine that's cueing us that it is going to degrade quickly within your body and not be able to do much else than the task at hand.
Right.
So does the temperature give you a cueing as well? Do you sense that's helpful?
Not particularly. The mRNA is pretty fragile. It's pretty sensitive. So to create a medium where you can inject it into an arm and get the cell to take it up was a bit of a challenge. And they've been looking at this technology for a while, trying to use it for other treatment modalities as well. But it's pretty fickle. It's very brittle, kind of like a piece of chocolate on a hot day. So M&M's kind of solved that problem by putting the candy coating around it. So now the chocolate doesn't melt
in your hand.
So it's kind of the same. With this mRNA, they've created the ability to stabilize it. But part of the stabilization process is the really cold temperature. When we take the vaccine out before we give it, we warm it up to room temperature, because injecting cold things are incredibly painful. We don't like to do that. So we do
Thank
warm it up.
you.
We do warm it up before we give it, but once it warms up, it's the M&Ms in the hot car type of deal.
Have you had opportunity where you've had a choice in the pharmacy? You've got Moderna sitting there, you've got Johnson & Johnson sitting there, and now all of a sudden you've got a choice. Is there a subset of patients that you would recommend one over the other if we are in the luxury of having multiples?
Mm-hmm.
Does that happen, or is that?
It hasn't happened yet.
Okay.
We did get a shipment of Johnson & Johnson, and people were able to schedule for one vaccine or the other. So people made their own choice.
Okay.
And then we were giving whichever vaccine they came in for. Until it becomes more available, the choice is limited, certainly right now.
Okay.
So, but as far as would I have a preference, it depends on what your goals are. A lot of people are looking for the one dose, one day, get over it, be done deal. And ideally, that might be some of our younger patients that are not as high risk for complications to begin with. The Moderna and Pfizer seem to be better at preventing COVID infections, so your higher risk patients might benefit more from no infection, but they all do the job of keeping you out of the hospital and keeping you alive. So there's no real big difference between any of the three at that point. So right now it's just a numbers game, and any of the vaccines are good.
One group I'm thinking of is fear of needles. And so is there a way that a patient could say, I really, really, really want to get the Johnson & Johnson. Can you help me get it? Is there a pathway you could recommend to that kind of patient so that they could solve a problem such as fear of needles?
And they're a great one for the Johnson & Johnson. It's just one needle.
Okay.
One time, one and done.
But do you know when a J&J shipment is coming?
No.
No.
And that's been the issue, the supply issue. And that was the issue early on with both Moderna and Pfizer, is the availability, the number of doses available. So we have a lot of people needing to get vaccinated and not enough vaccine to do said number of people. So now we're getting more vaccine, and we've done a large number of people. So at this point, as it starts to free up, if we get more Johnson & Johnson, the choice will become available just because there's more vaccine now than there was.
Are you hearing about any other vaccines that might be arriving in the near future of different kinds?
Yeah, arriving, I have not heard of anything.
Okay.
I know they're using AstraZeneca vaccine over in Europe and UK, and they have not applied for emergency use in the US. So until they do, and whether we will approve that, I have no idea.
Because we've heard an awful lot about the blood clots with AstraZeneca,
Right.
and that could be a question at the pharmacy. So it's a non-issue for us right now.
Right.
It's just confusing because you're hearing about a side effect of a vaccine.
Right.
And so for folks that are hearing that issue, it's not relevant to our region.
We're not seeing that with any of the currently approved vaccines, so it's not an issue here in the United States.
And so if you could, if you're meeting someone, I'd like to come back to the hesitancy issue again. And as you were to give them your best advice, what would that be to someone that's hesitant about a vaccine? There's so many things you could choose from, but for you, what's the most important things you'd like for those folks to hear?
So personally, I would try to urge people to become educated.
Excellent.
I mean, information from a trusted source, whether it's a CDC, whether it's a healthcare provider, doctor, pharmacist. You know, there's a lot of information out there, good and bad. And if we go to a trusted source with good information, I want people to make their decision based on the scientific facts, talking to people that have done it, people that are giving the vaccine, people that are recommending it, not listening to some Hollywood star that says all vaccines are bad. They have a lot of pull. They're very popular. People follow them, and a lot of the decisions are made because they're popular. But that's not a good reason to make a decision. So I try to tell people, get informed, become educated, and make the decision for yourself based on the current information that's accurate. There are, I know, some religious beliefs, some religious issues for people, and if that's a problem, I respect that. But don't make a decision because somebody told you shouldn't get a vaccine. Do your research and get the information for yourself and make your own decision.
Thank you. Looking into your crystal ball, what will the summer and fall look like related to COVID-19?
That is the $1 million question. And I don't know that anybody has any idea what that's going to look like. Seems like everything's changing on a daily basis. And certainly as vaccine becomes more available, as it is, and more people get vaccinated, we will see a decline in infections, as we did last summer too. In summer where people are outdoors, the vaccine doesn't spread. We should see a drop in cases anyway. I think the bigger question will be what is going to happen next fall. Simply because when it starts to get cold and we move back indoors, if we've got everybody vaccinated, I think we'll be in a much better position to be back to normal. I don't think we'll start seeing spikes and lockdowns and everything that we've been seeing, because the vaccine process, vaccinated individuals will tremendously reduce the infection rate. And I think we'll be okay.
Excellent. Now, we never wore our masks this entire time. And we both come from environments where we're wearing our masks all the time.
Right.
Why aren't we wearing our masks for this little conversation?
As we would have it, we're both vaccinated. We're both fully vaccinated. And I don't feel like there's any risk for us to be sitting here talking to each other.
And that's a great freedom.
It's a wonderful feeling. Right.
And so that's great. Thank you. We're back live again because there's two questions that we realized we want to make sure people hear about.
Right.
And the first one that I want to invite you to help me with is what happens after the vaccine? What should a person do if they have signs and symptoms that would allow, or that would alert that would be helpful to our community?
Yeah, so the CDC has a program set up. It's called VSafe. V as in Victor, SAFE.
Okay.
And it's currently only used on a smartphone. It's not a computer program, and it's not an app that you can use on the phone. You register with the CDC through the VSafe tab, and they send you text messages after a vaccine. You register when you got the vaccine, which vaccine you received, and they will send you a text message every day, ask how you're feeling. You respond to them, tell them how you're feeling, what symptoms you're having, if you're having anything, daily for the first 5 days, and then weekly for the next 5 weeks. And after your second dose, the process starts over again. They kind of check in with you daily. They want to know if you're having any issues, what issues you're having, how severe are they. They're trying to track all this data to get the information back out to people on how people are feeling and doing with the vaccine. If there is anything severe or major, in particular, if you have to go to the hospital or require any special care, we will then, as providers, either pharmacy, doctors, nurses, will then provide that information to the CDC through the VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, where we report the severe events. So we will report those and let us know if you're having any severe events, in particular, anything that requires any extra treatment afterwards. And the VSafe option on your phone to follow up with is a good idea.
I found it fairly innocuous. That they typically ask you about 2 or 3 page, just it would be maybe 6 questions that you're answering, and those go down as you get further from the event, so that it eventually is just 1 page with a couple of questions.
Right.
So it's been reasonably innocuous from my mind. Do you have a sense of personal information or things that there's sensitivity with what the government
Right.
gets?
And I do believe they're protecting privacy on this one. They're looking more for the events and trying to help people if there's questions. It's another communication with people if there's any questions. And certainly if there's anything that comes up that they detect, they can certainly get more information to providers and let people know what else is going on if something comes up.
And so so what I hadn't heard is what you folks do if you hear about a serious event.
Yeah.
You have another layer
Yes.
of information and is that with the CDC as well? Is that where you're sending the information?
So it's actually for all vaccines. It's not just this COVID vaccine. It's called the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, VAERS.
Okay.
And any vaccine with any adverse event, anything that happens with any vaccine gets reported to this reporting system. And that's where they come up with, and I'm guessing the issues with the AstraZeneca vaccine may have come through this or a similar type of system where you start to see things that don't show up in the initial studies, that now that we're immunizing a lot more people, you start to see the little things come up. And they don't happen very often, but when they do happen, we need to be reporting it.
And this is wonderfully helpful for us to understand these vaccines, which still are not fully approved. These are still coming in under emergency use. So this helps all of us to know what the profile is of this vaccine into the future. So this is really wonderfully important. And I'd encourage everyone to do it if you have a smartphone. It's helpful. And for me, it was a bit reassuring because I could keep pushing the button. I feel good. I feel good. I feel good. I sort of enjoyed doing that every day because that was most of my responses is nothing's happening, but here it is anyway. That helps, I think, all of us. The other question that I had is, I'm sure there are patients that come to you and they have had COVID. They have gone through the disease and now they're thinking about the vaccine. What advice would you give those folks that are coming to the counter?
Yeah, so the people that have had COVID, the recommendation is to still become vaccinated. So if you've had COVID, it doesn't mean you don't need the vaccination. The vaccination still is beneficial. The one thing I do tell people with the vaccine, in particular the 2-dose series, is people that have had COVID are experiencing more reactions to the first dose than we're seeing with people that have not had COVID. Most of those people are having more of a reaction to the second dose. But people that have had COVID seem to be having more of a reaction to the first dose. So when I said earlier, the first dose is not too bad, we do see a little bit of a change if you've had COVID.
So let me just clarify. If they've had the COVID-19, they will still receive 2 doses of the Moderna or the Pfizer. They won't just receive sort of a booster. They'll enter into the full series.
Right, and they're currently looking at whether you just need 1 dose if you've had COVID.
Okay.
But currently they don't have the data back, so currently the recommendation is 2 doses.
Is the 2.
Johnson & Johnson, just the 1 dose.
Excellent. And so the question is what's the time element? And so we tend to think in annual. Does the disease give you protection for an entire year so that you can get your booster shot in essence from the vaccine anytime in a year, or is it a shorter term than that?
Well, I don't think we're clear on how long the immunity is lasting, either with infection or from the vaccination.
Okay.
There's concern that the vaccination will have a limited lifespan. And obviously it's been used for a limited amount of time. So that's about all we know.
And I reviewed this data, it would be a few weeks back. So please, for any of the folks listening, please review it again. But I reviewed the CDC and their recommendation was 3 months, that the disease is going to give you 3 months worth of protection, which means you need to get a vaccine sometime before that clock is up so that you continue to have protection from the virus.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Was there any other question that that you feel would be relevant to our community that would help us in this conversation?
I would urge people to reach out. If you have questions, reach out to your healthcare professional. You're always welcome to call us. I mean, pharmacists, we're always available. We're always there. We're always glad to answer questions. So if you have one, give us a call.
Excellent. What a wonderful offer. And I know this community thanks you for being there. And I thank you and my family thanks you because you are a stellar source of information in a crazy amount of knowledge. And so what it takes to get the knowledge base you guys and gals have to have is utterly stunning. So thank you for all that hard work that you did in preparation for our community, as well as continuing to deliver that knowledge here to us. Kevin, thank you. This was a wonderful perspective from our pharmacy, and thank you for being such an important part of our community. And your work has been so essential in getting us to a much safer place than we are. And so we certainly appreciate your time. And so next week will be our week number 5. And what we'll be doing next week is hearing stories from those who have had COVID-19. And I'm sure you've had someone in your world that has experienced it. I know I have, and my family has some stories that I wish we weren't able to tell, but we can, and they've been quite profound. I bet your family has had some stories as well. And so next week, we'll be doing some Zoom calling with those around the community that have a story to tell when it comes to COVID. And our point is to make sure those who are hesitant hear from those that have experienced it, neighbors and friends and colleagues that have a story about COVID. And we trust that would be an important element of the information that we all need on how we should act and react to threats or problems in our community. So join us next week on Thursday at 7 o'clock again, and we'd be pleased to join you again. If you have a story and you'd like to be a part of that, there's still time. And so would you take a moment and send an email to information@mccallcollege.org. That's one word, information@mccallcollege.org, and alert us to the possibility of inviting you next Thursday night. Or if it would be easier for you, to go to mccallcollege.org, that's www.mccallcollege.org, and click COVID information, and then you'll see a registration. And that would allow you to give us a little information and a little more contact information so that we can make sure we can contact you. So both of those pathways would alert us to your story. And we would certainly like to have your story and make that a part of the record of COVID-19 in our region. Thank you for joining us tonight. We trust we'll be able to see you again.